Good morning and welcome to Hardin Life Live. We are the Hardins. We are a family of coaches and counselors with Hardin Life resources that are committed to giving you a therapeutic and biblical perspective on how to live your best life. And this month we are talking about unhealthy patterns. Last week we kind of introed on just a general observation of what unhealthy patterns are. But today we wanted to approach it more specifically by talking about unhealthy patterns that are specific to men. Men. So we're going to put you on the hot seat today.
Good. I like being on the hot seat. I are a man.
Yes,
and I am very familiar with unhealthy patterns of men, not only personally in my own life, but having worked with men for more than 30 years and just having gotten back from our men's coaching weekend, I'm freshly aware of 3 unhealthy patterns that I would just throw out immediately that is so typical of men. 1, passivity.
Wow.
2, avoidance. And 3, anger. And I consistently see these 3 unhealthy patterns in men. Passivity is the idea, even in terms of the 4 F's of defense, that we would say is the fawn: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Just being passive. I'll have what she's having. I'll do what she's doing. What we always say, because of Genesis chapter 3 and the results of the fall, if she will, I don't have to. If she does, I won't. And that is so often the typical pattern of a man. And even Adam was guilty of that, because if you read Genesis chapter 3, and Eve is engaged in a somewhat of a dialogue, if not just listening to the serpent's monologue to her. Adam is standing there. Verse 6 is very clear. Adam was standing there the whole time. Wow. And what did Adam do?
Nothing.
Wow.
He deferred.
Sounds like you know what you're talking about.
It's easy to see how it happens, but Audrey and I were just speaking at a parenting seminar last night, and I made the comment just like, well, we all know most of the women are running the households and with the children. And I wasn't trying to be like, okay, but I know the reality of just what you said. If they do, I don't have to do. And women will instinctively do, and especially when it comes to orders of family dynamics in the home, which I guess we'll have to cover next week, patterns women need to break. But it's really maddening because women actually resent that pattern of passivity, and that starts to break the marital dyad down because they're not going to let the gap be empty, and they will step in. And I guess my big hope is that the answer to passivity is initiative versus saying, oh, I'm not unwilling to do it, but don't wait to be asked. Just actually initiate. Is that what you tell the guys?
Well, there's no doubt. And again, I don't believe a woman wants to take charge, that she doesn't want to lead the home. She doesn't want to take all of that initiative, but out of fear, she will.
Exactly.
And the opposite of love is not hate relationally. I mean, semantically it is love and hate. But the opposite of love relationally is fear.
Totally.
And God's very clear, again in Genesis 3, that one of the results of the fall and the consequences of the fall relative to a woman is, 1, she'll experience pain in childbirth, and number 2, she will seek to control the situation. But that's out of fear. That's out of having been left standing, talking with the serpent, engaged with the serpent in the initial downfall of the human race, and Adam did nothing. And so the woman is continuing to try to gain her sense of autonomy and power by taking control of the situation, and it never works that way.
It's painful.
And so, yes, what I've learned in my own personal life, and we work with men, is the antidote for the three negative patterns of passivity, avoidance, and anger is three positives. Initiate, take responsibility, take responsibility, and number three is fight. Not fight with, but fight for.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Well, I see so much of these patterns in my office, and then just with really all generations. I wouldn't say that it's more common with older men versus younger men. I see it everywhere. I think the ways that men are passive or the ways that they avoid are different based on age. And what I also consider is, in terms of our if you've been sitting with us enough, you've heard our statistic on dissociation. It's just easy to check out when life feels overwhelming or too exhausting or too anxiety producing. I just dissociate and I numb, and I stop accessing that higher center of the brain where taking responsibility and initiative are accessed and fighting, and I just go into that reactive survival brain. And essentially what that looks like is the highest sense of pleasure and meaning and purpose that you can get to when you're dissociated is just the appetite center: sleep, food, and sex. And that's why I think we have a rise in the pornography industry. I think we're really struggling as a country with obesity and unhealth, and then in terms of just sleep, that rise in depression and wanting to stay in the covers and just check out, or the recliner. And so I think that even from a brain perspective, there's an explanation for why we get stuck. It's easier to just numb and survive than to fight and take initiative. And part of recognizing our patterns certainly is to recognize tendencies for men, just naturally, biblically, creation, those tendencies, and then the tendencies for you personally. I think we said last week, just noticing, what do I have a tendency towards, and then inviting others into that conversation with you, taking ownership and acknowledging, man, this is my tendency, this is where I have a hard time, I need help. Because Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed. In the New Living, it says, don't copy the behavior or customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person. And I love that, because the world definitely tells you to comfort and enjoy life, eat, drink, and be merry. But God calls us to initiate, to take responsibility, and to fight. And that's seen throughout Scripture.
Well, again, go back to the three negative patterns. Passivity, just doing nothing. Avoidance, being actively headed in the wrong direction. I'm not engaging that. I'm going to do everything I can to avoid that. And of course, that's where addiction comes in, and all kinds of just crazy behavior to make sure that you don't face anything that might cause discomfort. And then number three, that old pattern of anger. And what's interesting about anger is not even a primary emotion. Anger is a secondary emotion, which means what's underneath the anger is really what needs to be addressed. And the anger is simply just this unhealthy protector. And so the antidote for those three negatives, the passivity, the avoidance, and the anger, is number one, to initiate. I believe that that's what God has called men to do. We are hunters, we are fixers. We were meant to rule, subdue, and have dominion, the creation mandate. Move into the garden, name the animals, initiate, initiate, initiate. Not control, but to initiate. Secondly, we were made to be first responders, to take responsibility, which means to own. And what we typically do as men is, rather than take ownership, we blame and criticize. We blame and criticize. Blame and criticism is the opposite, unhealthy opposite of taking responsibility. I mean, it's like a firefighter showing up to a fire as a first responder, and rather than responding to what needs to be done, he stands there and criticizes everybody for starting a fire.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
And then finally, just closing with fight. We were made to fight as men. Unfortunately, we are all too often fighting with and not fighting for.
Wow. Those are so incredible. And just asking yourself, am I passive? Am I avoidant? Am I angry? It's a great way to start to identify the patterns, and I love your points for changing. Don't miss Phil's blog. It's excellent. And go to hardinlife.com and read about it. And we will look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, thank God.
Have a
We'll
good
talk
week.
about winning.